So today we're going to go on a discovery flight all around Sydney, Australia. And this will be from the perspective of somebody who lived in Sydney, was born and bred there, and lived there for over 40 years. And let's see how well Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 represents it. We'll be flying a Cessna 172 aircraft and having a look at not only some of the landmarks but also at the general layout of the... So there's Sydney City in the distance, see by the high-rise buildings that are there. Let's start exploring. Okay, ready to fly. So you'll notice that there's Middle Head here. Over here will be North Head and South Head. So these represent obviously the headlands. North Head, Sydney's North Shore, commences there. Up there, the Pacific Ocean. And across here is the South Head. So it's these headlands that provide such a sheltered harbour for Sydney. Makes it one of the most popular harbours in the world. Extensive amount of bays, make safe havens for any small and large boats. Okay, so let's head along. As we travel along this area, we're going towards Rose Bay now. So Rose Bay is quite well known for having had a sea base there previously. There still is a sea base, I guess, for smaller float plane aircraft, but in the old days used to fly some large clipper type of aircraft from here, and would go to places like Tasmania and other international destinations. In the distance we can see the Harbour Bridge and also the Opera House, two of the most famous landmarks probably for Sydney. All of this real estate around the foreshores is very expensive. A bunch of small little islands that you can see, middle of the harbour. And we're coming up to one that was built to defend the harbour many years ago. And they built a fort on there called Fort Denison. Fort Denison straight ahead of us now. And Fort Denison never fired a gun in anger, never had to be called upon to defend the harbour. Going past the Opera House now, with the famous sails. This is the Royal Botanical Gardens. Find the Opera House. Beautiful spot to have your lunch. And let's head around. You can see a naval base down here that's called Cockatoo Island. And they use that for maintenance of many of the naval ships from the Navy. Let's continue along. And of course the iconic Sydney Harbour Bridge. It's beautiful at all times, but certainly on New Year's Eve every year these days, they put on a huge firework. And the bridge is all lit up. That fireworks show usually runs for about 20 minutes or so. They spend many millions of dollars, and it really is a sight to behold. Heading into Sydney CBD now, Central Business District. And building ahead of us here is called Centrepoint Tower. I don't know if it's still the case, but for many, many years it was the tallest building in the southern hemisphere. And right at the top there, an observation deck, also a revolving restaurant. You can go there and dine, sit on a table, and the table spins around the outside, the inside I guess, but more or less the spins around the outside edge, so that you get a 360 degree view over time of the entire city. Very nice way to spend an evening. There's Anzac Bridge below us, so named in honour of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. As you can see, you don't need to go far out from the city and you start to get into suburbia. Sydney was founded basically in 1788 when the English sailor Captain James Cook sailed into Sydney Harbour and declared Australia to be a colony of the British Empire. But he wasn't the first one to have discovered the harbour. In fact, there was a Dutch sailor who was sailing out of Sydney Harbour when James Cook sailed in on the Endeavour sail ship and then declared settlement for British. Now, not very far out from the city here, but where Kingsford Smith International or Sydney Airport is located. I remember as a kid, used to enjoy sitting on some of the beaches around this area here and watching the planes come into land. And I thought it was fascinating at the time that the runways were actually built out into the ocean, where some of them were. And also, some of the road work actually tunnels underneath the runways. Well, so you can drive underneath a landing plane. We're headed towards the southern suburbs of Sydney now. St George Hospital, a large regional hospital, which unfortunately I had to spend many, many months in years gone by. So it's nice to see it from the air, and it's nice to see it in virtual reality rather than in real. There's a lot of very dedicated doctors and nurses there, and I was certainly extremely grateful for their assistance. We're going to head out towards Bankstown. So Bankstown Airport is probably one of the busiest civil aviation airports near Sydney. And it's actually where I learnt to fly. Kind of nice. You're able to go from Bankstown to Sydney by air, about 10 minutes. Okay, so we'll head our way to Bankstown Airport, and after that I think we'll head back towards Sydney and then explore some of the northern suburbs. So Sydney is quite densely populated, and I believe now it's around about 5.5 million people live in the Greater Sydney region. Certainly a lot more crowded than when I was growing up here. So let's do a touch and go at Bankstown Airport, I think. Perhaps a little bit too fast there.
500.
Hey, laps. Well, so far I think the representation of the Sydney area is pretty good. Certainly the trees are a lot closer to those that I remember compared to the ones that appear in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. So I think they're doing a reasonable job in that regard. Stadium Australia is pretty well straight ahead. It, of course, was built for the Sydney 2000 Olympics, where it hosted most of the major events. I was living in Sydney in the year 2000 and I was very excited about the Olympics. But then I found that it was almost impossible for us to get tickets to events. They'd been pretty well sold out. Immediately they went on sale. Again, something I'm not sure of the capacity. I think it might be around about 100 to 120,000 or thereabouts. It's obviously still being used. They mainly play football matches there. The local football code, Australian Rugby League, it's always been very popular in Sydney and New South Wales. I was fortunate enough to own a half cabin 25-foot motorboat when I was living in Sydney, and I used to travel along this waterway. This is known as the Parramatta River, quite frequently, and it would take you all the way from one of the western suburbs called Parramatta right along this stretch of water, which is virtually like a marine expressway to get towards the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And from there you used to be able to travel out under the bridge through the harbour along the direction that we flew in on today, and go and visit some fantastic beaches, including Manly Beach, which is an extremely famous surfing destination. New Gladesville Bridge, very elegant. Okay, so we'll continue along towards Harbour Bridge once more. See if we can find Darling Harbour. The Darling Harbour used to be a series of old piers, etc., used for the offload of cargo from ships, and then it was turned into a very nice shopping centre area where there's lots of dining. Yeah, I'm interested too. Flight Simulator is supposed to be swarming with boats and ships. See just how populated it is. The old Piedmont Power Station over to our right. Big coal burning power station. It's been decommissioned. Yeah. Bit of trouble finding Darling Harbour. Easy enough to find by boat. Just turn left after you come underneath the harbour bridge. Here we are here. Fiction, shopping centres, hotels, exhibition centres. Very nice place. Okay, off to the North Shore now, as promised. So the North Shore is kind of where the old rich live. And growing up in the south, I didn't get to go there too often the early days. The building on the left is the Royal North Shore Hospital. It's one of the more prestigious hospitals in Sydney, and they have a lot of advanced equipment and conduct a lot of advanced procedures there. They've saved a lot of lives over the years. Okay. And we might finish off by taking a quick jaunt down the south coast of the towards maybe we'll go as far as Pearl Harbor Airport in Albion Park, Illawarra, which is around about, I think it's 80 to 100 kilometres south of Sydney City. It'll only take us about 20 or 25 minutes to get there. and a lot of beautiful scenery along the way. So I plan on doing some of the other Discovery flights and also perhaps the photography flights that they've got built into Flight Simulator 2024 for areas that I'm not familiar with. But before I do that, I think that I will also probably take you on a tour around Singapore, where I live for around about. Yeah, I'm old. So we'll just follow the coastline towards the south now. As we go along, we'll be passing through the Royal National Park. It's a very extensive parkland covering hundreds of square kilometres. I guess for most Sydney-siders, if they'd spent any time abroad, it was always an emotional experience coming back and flying in and seeing the harbour, especially if you were coming in from the north, as we are now. Truly is a spectacular city. Amazing views out the window. Over there on the right is the Sydney Football Stadium, as well as the Sydney Cricket Ground, two very sporting venues. Football Stadium again. I don't know if it's still being used. I know they were revamping it. Again, it's used for mainly the Australian Rugby League or the soccer matches. Racing track. That's called Rose Hill Race Course. Okay, so rather than overflying the airport again, we'll follow the coastline down. It meanders a little bit, but quite not. Over to the right is a golf course. And I think that one's called Sydney Golf Course. So I guess it's probably fair to say that Sydney is also known for a lot of its beaches. Many white sandy beaches around, and they're very easy to get to. Some are sheltered, others are good surfing beaches. Oil refineries over here. I think we are near a place called Kurnell. And apart from being well known for the oil refineries, they also did a lot of sand mining in this area. As you can see, it's a pretty sandy promontory there. And I remember that they used to have a lot of sand dunes. And as a kid, my family and I had travelled along to these sand dunes, and we'd take along with us a cardboard box, and we'd climb to the top of the sand dunes, hop in it, and then use the box basically as a sled to careen our way down to the bottom of the dune. So it was always an exhilarating experience. I'm very lucky if we didn't suffer some scrapes and bruises on the way, but it was a heck of a lot of fun. And straight ahead of us is the Royal National Park, and this is about a 56 square mile area, or 150 square kilometres of natural bushland, and it's interspersed with a variety of different campsites and areas where you can park and have a nice barbecue or something to eat, and enjoy nature. It's a lovely area, and always good for a visit. It takes about half an hour or so to travel there, maybe an hour from the centre of Sydney. A little bit off the beaten path, and usually not very crowded, but lovely waters, good fishing. You're into that sort of thing. Lovely river. It goes through the national park as well. be able to hire rowboats and canoes and spend a nice day just out on the water. Now, the sign there for waterfall actually refers to a suburb, not a physical waterfall. Although I guess at one stage that's where it took its name from. Also over there is Camp Coots, which is an area that the scouts often have what they call jamborees and so on there. So basically a gathering of any of the boy and girl scouts. I'm not even sure if these days they call them boy and girl scouts or just scouts. Okay, so lots of trees as you can see. Maybe go along the waterline a little bit more so you can see the coast. So coming up on the right, you'll see the roadway actually is built out over them. It's somewhere called Sea Cliff Bridge. Fairly new, because the road there was subject to getting a lot of landslips. Falling rocks would knock away the road, and so to make it safe, they actually extended the road out over the water. And quite a nice walk over this bridge as well. With the rest of the road travelling from that point. Further on, if I haven't missed it, there should be a place called Bald Hill. Now that's an area where they do a lot of hang gliding. The guys strap themselves to big kites, run down the hill, and launch themselves over the water and rely on the wind to keep them up for long periods of time. It's fascinating to watch them, to remind me of birdmen. I have missed that, unfortunately. But, yes, go up here, you get the idea. Bald Hill, of course, got its name because it didn't have trees on it. That was an ideal place for run and jump off. Fortunately, as far as I know, nobody forgot to strap their kite on. So this region is known as the Illawarra, and Illawarra is an Aboriginal name, the Aborigines being the indigenous people of Australia, and the area on the left there became known as the Illawarra because the definition of Illawarra is between the mountains and the sea. I think that is quite appropriate. We're approaching Wollongong now. Wollongong is the first major city to the south of Sydney. About 60 to 80 kilometres, as I mentioned before, because Albion Park or Shell Harbour Airport is not far beyond it. And Wollongong was known predominantly for the steelworks they have there. In the old days, employ tens of thousands of people. But these days, with modernisation and all different types of equipment, workforce itself has dropped considerably. But it's part of the BHP mining group. BHP standing for Broken Hill Proprietary was one of the biggest, and still is one of the biggest, mining organisations in the world. They mine everything from iron ore, copper, coal, and well, anything else you can basically dig out of the ground. BHP's involved in, and often the iron ore would be transported here to Wollongong for the formation of various, building products and other products. Pretty well headed towards the heart of Wollongong now. I lived in Albion Park for many years. Had a business in Wollongong too, once upon a time. Although the steelworks is not a very pretty place, it's certainly an interesting place, and I had the opportunity of visiting many occasions. And it was always fascinating to see molten metal being transported in giant pots, huge trucks, lots of specialists. Here is the Wollongong Lighthouse by Bacon. But I think that's where it should be. And over here, of course, we're approaching the steelwork. As we were travelling down the, we call it a mountain, but it's really just a hill, from Sydney towards Wollongong, you would often see iron ore ships just lined up almost as far as the eye could see, waiting their turn to offload their cargo for this place to turn it into cans and girders and whatever else you use steel products in. Okay, we're near the end of our trip. Sorry to have extended it a little bit beyond Sydney, but I started to reminisce a bit. So my verdict is the representation of Sydney and the southern suburbs all the way down here is pretty darn good. I can recognise many individual buildings. The streets and roads are in the right places. I think the representation of road traffic and roads in general is significantly better in Microsoft 2024 than it was in. And overall, I think the scenery, well, it's much more enjoyable to look at. Higher definition. So certainly Microsoft 2024, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 is not without its faults. But if you're prepared to lean on its strengths rather than look for its weakness, I think that you can really still enjoy the product. I hope that you've enjoyed travelling along with me. This is Lake Illawarra over on our left. Not actually a bay, it is closed off from the ocean by a very small amount of land there, you can see. Every now and then they have to allow some salt water into the lake so that the lake doesn't stagnant. Okay, we're approaching Shell Harbour Airport, where it was known as Wollongong Airport and Albion Park Airport at various times as well. There have been small regional airlines that have used it as a base of operations from time to time, but mainly it's just for general aviation. One of the things though about this airport is it does house what's known as the Historic Aircraft Restoration Society Museum, or HARS. And that particular museum has a variety of fascinating aircraft that have been preserved, many capable of flight. There's a Connie, a Constellation, as well as a 747, one of the Qantas 747 aircraft, which was flown here quite a few years ago now and landed on this runway that we're about to land on now. And it was quite a fascinating experience. You can certainly look up on YouTube, I believe, to see landing of a 747, what is relatively short runway. Now, in the old days, once I land here, I would have been maybe 5 minutes away from it. Oops. Bad landing. Never mind. You can see the 747 over there. This is where the HARS Museum is. And again, it's pretty well represented. The interesting thing, of course, with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, look at the graphics here on the runway, are very, very bad. I mean, may not have the fastest internet connection in the world, but that's always a little bit. There we go, popped in. Okay, let's just turn off here, go past the HARS Museum, and we'll shut down. Okay, I think let's go right here. Okay, parking brake on. Mixture off. Just have a little look at where we are. Mixture off. Okay. We've got an aircraft here that won't stop. But that's alright, because we're going to stop. We have, fortunately, some poor graphics, but once it streams in, it looks quite nice. Anyhow, I'm rambling. Thanks very much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this trip of Sydney and down Sydney's south coast to Pearl Harbor Airport. And we'll look forward to seeing you at our next adventure as we continue to discover various locations around the world in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.